Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of the Sacred Heart Province, headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, and the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability, CUSA being headquartered here in Cicero, Illinois. As we listen to the Gospel for the fourth Sunday of Advent, we come to the third and last theme of our Advent observance, namely, preparation for the mystery of the Incarnation. From the very first chapter of Matthew's Gospel we read, "This is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. When his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found with child through the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, since he was a righteous man, yet unwilling to expose her to shame, decided to divorce her quietly. Such was his intention when, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, 'Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary, your wife, into your home. For it is through the Holy Spirit that this child has been conceived in her. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins.' All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet, 'Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel,' which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke, he did as the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took his wife into his home." Several weeks ago, when we began to read from the Gospel of Matthew, I mentioned, and want to reiterate here, that Matthew's Gospel was written for the Jewish community. These people were steeped in the knowledge of their religion, of their faith. They were people of the Old Testament. These people also would have looked to Joseph as the man of the family to be the one who would receive the annunciation of Jesus' birth. Whereas in the Gospel of Luke, the angel appears to Mary. In the Gospel of Matthew, the announcement comes to Joseph, the man of the house. This is Jewish society. This is Jewish culture. The fourth Sunday of Advent always contains an Annunciation story. In this A-cycle, we hear from the Gospel of Matthew. Next year, we will hear the Annunciation story from Luke's Gospel. And in the C-cycle, the cycle that we have just completed, we heard the Annunciation story of John the Baptist's birth. So these Annunciation stories are to introduce us to this new covenant, this new way of looking at God. Again, these Jewish people would have known their prophets, and the prophet Joel is the one who said that old men dream dreams and young men see visions. And it is in that tradition, in that kind of milieu, that Matthew sets his gospel. Joseph hears this message as in a dream. And later on, when the Magi are making their decisions regarding their visitation of Jesus, they will also hear in a dream that they are to return home by a different route. So this fascination with dreams is not so much a matter of a fascination about paranormal activities as it is really harking back to the prophet Joel, which Matthew would have been very, very much aware of. So this dream that Matthew writes about and that Joseph hears tells him to take Jesus into his house, tells him to take Mary into his house. Sometimes people make a big deal out of the fact that Mary seems to be the typical unwed mother. Again, this just does not do justice to their society. Matthew tells us very clearly that Mary was betrothed to Joseph, and being betrothed was almost as good as being married. So Mary is not an unwed mother here, but she is in danger because the child is not Joseph's. Joseph, however, makes the choice, chooses to accept Mary, chooses to move Mary into his house, chooses to accept her child. This gospel really accentuates the fact that it took two people, just as it still does today, to bring new life into the world. It takes both a man and a woman. And even though Jesus' birth was not a natural birth, even though this is a virgin birth, it still takes the decision of the man, Joseph, to bring this woman and her child into his home. When we reflect on that, we begin to see that God's will for us, for them, plays out in unexpected ways. Most of us have our lives all laid out before us. Most of us have our lives all planned, and yet it is God's will that will see us through our lives. It is God's will that we need to accept, and it is God's will to which we need to be conformed. Mary and Joseph stand for us today in the gospel as examples of what that looks like when we conform ourselves to God's will. For more information about CUSA, please visit our website at www.cuson.org or look us up on Facebook.